In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where rows of neatly trimmed lawns and pastel-colored houses stretched as far as the eye could see, there lived a man named Ethan Carter. Ethan was an ordinary guy in his mid-30s with an unassuming demeanor. He worked a regular 9-to-5 job, paid his bills on time, and kept to himself most days. But there was one thing that set him apart from his neighbors: his love for fishing. For Ethan, fishing wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to unwind, to escape the noise of everyday life, and find peace. And luckily for him, right at the heart of the neighborhood was a beautiful, shimmering lake. The lake was small but picturesque, surrounded by tall oak trees and dotted with lily pads. It had been there for decades, long before the neighborhood was even built, and it served as a shared space for all the homeowners. Kids played near its banks, couples strolled along its edges, and ducks floated lazily across its surface. To Ethan, it felt like a hidden slice of paradise, tucked away amidst the cookie-cutter homes. Every weekend, he'd grab his trusty fishing rod, a cooler filled with snacks, and head down to the dock. There, he'd spend hours casting his line into the calm waters, waiting patiently for a bite. Ethan never thought twice about fishing in the lake. After all, it belonged to everyone. Or so he believed. The Homeowners Association, HOA, governed the neighborhood, setting rules about everything from mailbox colors to lawn decorations. But no one had ever mentioned that fishing required special permission. So Ethan went about his routine, blissfully unaware that trouble was brewing. One sunny Saturday morning, Ethan arrived at the lake with his usual gear. The air was crisp, and the water sparkled under the golden sunlight. As he cast his line, he felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. But just as he was reeling in a small bass, two figures approached him. They were dressed in business casual attire, holding clipboards and wearing stern expressions. These were representatives from the HOA. "Mr. Carter," one of them asked curtly. Ethan nodded, slightly confused. "We've received reports that you've been fishing in the lake without prior approval." "Approval?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? This is a shared space, isn't it?" The representatives exchanged glances before handing him a formal notice. "Fishing in the lake requires explicit permission from the HOA board," they explained. "Since you failed to obtain this, we're issuing you a fine of $500. Ethan stared at the paper in disbelief. A fine? For doing something he'd always assumed was perfectly fine. As the representatives walked away, leaving Ethan standing there with his fishing rod in hand, a mixture of emotions washed over him. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but mostly, he felt hurt. How could something as simple as fishing become such a big deal? Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't shake off the feeling of injustice. He decided to attend the next HOA meeting, hoping to clear things up. Little did he know, this seemingly minor incident would spiral into something much bigger and change the entire neighborhood forever. Ethan walked into the HOA meeting room feeling determined but nervous. The room was filled with familiar faces, his neighbors. But today, they weren't smiling or exchanging pleasantries. Instead, the atmosphere felt tense, almost hostile. Martha Langley, the HOA president, sat at the head of the table, her sharp gaze scanning the room like a hawk eyeing its prey. Ethan cleared his throat and stood up to speak. "I'm here because I want to understand," he began, trying to keep his tone calm and respectful. "The lake has always been part of our community. It's shared property, right? So why am I being fined for fishing there?" Martha leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the table. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "the lake may be on communal land, but it's governed by specific rules. Fishing requires prior approval to ensure we maintain balance in the ecosystem. You didn't follow those rules." "But no one ever told me about these rules," Ethan protested. "I've lived here for years, and not once did anyone mention that fishing needed special permission." "That's not our responsibility," Martha shot back. "It's your duty as a homeowner to familiarize yourself with the guidelines." The room erupted into murmurs. Some neighbors nodded in agreement with Martha, while others avoided making eye contact altogether. Then someone spoke up, a man named Greg who lived 2 doors down from Ethan. "Honestly, Ethan," Greg said, crossing his arms, "you're always out there fishing. Don't you think it disrupts the neighborhood? People come here to relax, not watch someone yank fish out of the water all day." Ethan blinked, taken aback. Disruptive. His quiet afternoons by the lake were hardly a disturbance compared to the loud pool parties or late-night barbecues some residents hosted. But before he could respond, another neighbor chimed in. This time, it was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman known for her love of gardening. "And what about the ducks?" she asked pointedly. "You scare them away every time you cast your line." That comment drew laughter from a few people in the room, though Ethan couldn't tell if it was genuine amusement or mockery. Heat rose to his cheeks as he realized how quickly this conversation had turned against him. He wasn't just fighting for the right to fish anymore. He was defending himself against accusations that seemed wildly exaggerated. Seeing Ethan struggle, Martha seized the moment. "If fishing is so important to you, Mr. Carter," she said with a smirk, "maybe you should buy your own lake." Her words hung in the air, met with scattered chuckles from the crowd. To her, it was clearly meant as sarcasm, a jab at Ethan's supposed audacity. But to Ethan, something shifted inside him. The comment stung, yes, but it also planted a seed of defiance. Why shouldn't he have control over the lake? If the HOA cared more about punishing him than fostering a sense of community, maybe it was time to take matters into his own hands. As the meeting dragged on, Ethan found himself tuning out the endless discussions about parking regulations and holiday decorations. His mind raced with possibilities. What if he really could buy the lake? Was it even possible? And more importantly, would doing so teach the HOA a lesson they wouldn't soon forget? By the time the meeting ended, Ethan left the room feeling both defeated and oddly inspired. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a small smile. Maybe Martha's snide remark wasn't such a bad idea after all. The idea of buying the lake had taken root in Ethan's mind, but he knew it was a long shot. Still, curiosity got the better of him. That night, instead of watching TV or scrolling through his phone, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open. He started researching who actually owned the lake. To his surprise, it didn't take long to uncover some surprising information. The lake wasn't technically owned by the HOA, or even by the neighborhood residents collectively. It turned out that the land and water body were part of a larger property once owned by a real estate developer named Harold Grayson. Years ago, Grayson had gone bankrupt during the housing market crash, leaving many of his projects unfinished. The lake, along with a few acres of surrounding land, had been seized by the bank and was now up for sale through an auction process. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart racing. Could this really be true? Was the lake, his sanctuary, available for purchase? He dug deeper, finding details about the upcoming auction. The starting bid was surprisingly low, given the location and size of the property. It seemed like a golden opportunity, but there was one big question. Could he afford it? Over the next few days, Ethan crunched numbers like never before. He pored over his savings account, reviewed his monthly expenses, and even considered taking out a small loan. It wasn't going to be easy. He'd have to tighten his belt for a while. But when he added everything up, including a modest inheritance from his late grandmother, he realized it might just be possible. Still, doubt lingered. Buying the lake wasn't just about money. It was about making a bold statement. What would his neighbors think? Would they see it as childish retaliation? Or worse, would they try to stop him? These questions swirled in his mind, but deep down, Ethan felt a spark of determination. If the HOA wanted to play hardball, then fine, he'd hit back with something they couldn't ignore. On the day of the auction, Ethan arrived early, dressed in his best suit to look professional. The event was held in a bland conference room at the local courthouse, where a handful of other bidders sat flipping through paperwork. Most of them were representatives from companies interested in developing the land. Ethan kept to himself, clutching his bidder number tightly as the proceedings began. When the auctioneer announced the lake property, Ethan's stomach churned. Bids flew back and forth, each one higher than the last. For a moment, he wondered if he'd made a huge mistake. But then, something unexpected happened. The corporate bidders dropped out one by one, leaving only Ethan and a single competitor. With a deep breath, Ethan raised his paddle again and again, refusing to back down. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the gavel came down. "Sold," the auctioneer declared, to bidder number 47. Ethan's hands trembled as he signed the paperwork. He had done it. He, Ethan Carter, now owned the lake. As he walked out of the courthouse, holding the deed in his hand, a mix of emotions washed over him. There was excitement, of course, but also a tinge of nervousness. This was uncharted territory, not just for him, but for the entire neighborhood. Little did Ethan know, his decision would send shockwaves through the community in ways he couldn't yet imagine. News of Ethan's purchase spread faster than wildfire through the neighborhood. At first, people didn't believe it. Ethan bought the lake. That can't be real, some whispered over coffee or during morning walks. But when a tall fence suddenly appeared around the perimeter of the lake, complete with a locked gate and a bold sign that read, ***, private property. No trespassing, ***, there was no denying the truth. The reactions were immediate and explosive. Neighbors gathered in driveways and online forums, their voices rising in outrage. "How dare he do this?" one woman exclaimed during a heated conversation on the community app. "That lake belongs to all of us." Others chimed in, accusing Ethan of being selfish, vindictive, and petty. Martha Langley, the HOA president, led the charge, calling an emergency meeting to address what she called this unprecedented act of hostility. At the meeting, tempers flared. Residents demanded answers, but Ethan remained calm as he addressed the room. "You fine me for using the lake without permission," he said, his tone measured but firm. "Now it's mine, and I've decided to ban fishing altogether." His words landed like a bombshell, leaving stunned silence followed by angry murmurs. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially Martha, whose face turned red as she struggled to find a response. To make matters worse, Ethan didn't stop at putting up a fence. He hired 2 security guards to patrol the area, ensuring no one trespassed. Their presence added fuel to the fire, making the situation feel even more personal. Parents complained they couldn't take their kids to feed the ducks anymore. Joggers grumbled about losing access to the scenic path around the lake. Even those who hadn't cared much about the lake before now felt its absence keenly. Martha tried to rally the neighborhood against Ethan, organizing petitions and threatening legal action. But every attempt hit a wall. The deed was clear. The lake belonged solely to Ethan, and he had every right to restrict access. Frustrated, Martha stormed into Ethan's driveway one evening, demanding to speak with him. "What do you think you're accomplishing here?" she snapped, her arms crossed tightly. "You're punishing everyone because of your little vendetta." Ethan leaned against his porch railing, unfazed. "This isn't about punishment, Martha. It's about fairness. You treated me like an outsider, someone who didn't deserve to enjoy something we all share. Well, guess what? Now you know how it feels." Her jaw tightened, but she had no comeback. As she stomped away, Ethan watched her go, feeling a mix of satisfaction and unease. On one hand, he relished seeing the HOA squirm under the weight of their own rules. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the growing tension in the air. The once friendly neighborhood now felt divided, with neighbors glaring at each other across fences and avoiding small talk at the mailboxes. Despite the backlash, Ethan stood his ground. He spent hours sitting on his newly purchased dock, staring out at the water he now controlled. Sometimes, he'd see residents peeking through the fence, their expressions ranging from anger to sadness. Children pressed their faces against the metal bars, pointing at the ducks swimming freely beyond reach. Each glance tugged at Ethan's conscience, but he reminded himself why he'd done this in the first place. Still, as days turned into weeks, Ethan began to wonder if he'd gone too far. Was cutting off the entire neighborhood really the best way to prove his point? Or had he simply traded one problem for another? As the weeks dragged on, the neighborhood sank deeper into a state of unrest. The once vibrant community now felt fractured, with neighbors divided into two camps: those who supported Ethan's actions and saw them as justified retaliation against the HOA's unfairness, and those who viewed him as a villain bent on ruining their lives. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, occasionally boiling over in heated arguments at the grocery store or during school pickups. Children were among the hardest hit. Many had grown up playing by the lake, skipping stones, chasing frogs, and feeding ducks. Now the fence stood as an impenetrable barrier between them and their cherished memories. Parents tried to explain the situation, but kids didn't care about property rights or HOA rules. All they knew was that something they loved had been taken away. One afternoon, Ethan spotted a group of children standing near the gate, their faces pressed against the cold metal bars. Their disappointment pierced through his resolve, leaving him uneasy. The tension reached a breaking point one evening when someone vandalized the fence surrounding the lake. Bright red spray paint scrawled across one of the gates read, ***bully. ***. News of the act spread quickly, igniting another round of debates. Some neighbors defended the vandalism, calling it a justified expression of frustration. Others condemned it, arguing that it only made the situation worse. Martha seized the opportunity to label Ethan as divisive, claiming his actions had turned the neighborhood into a battleground. But not everyone shared her perspective. Sophia Patel, a soft-spoken woman known for her kindness and fairness, decided to pay Ethan a visit. She arrived at his doorstep late one evening, holding a plate of homemade cookies. "I brought you something," she said with a warm smile. "Peace offering." Ethan hesitated before inviting her inside. They sat in his living room, the faint hum of cicadas drifting through the open window. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sophia broke the silence. "Look, Ethan, I'm not here to argue or tell you you're wrong. You've got every right to do what you did. But I think we both know this is hurting more than just the HOA. It's tearing us apart." Her words struck a chord. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I never wanted things to get this bad," he admitted. "I just wanted them to understand how it feels to be shut out." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "And they do understand now. Trust me, people are talking. And not just about you. They're questioning whether the HOA went too far in the first place. But keeping the lake closed isn't helping anyone heal. Can we find a way to move forward?" Her suggestion lingered in the air, planting a seed of possibility in Ethan's mind. He thought about the children peering through the fence, the angry glares from neighbors, and the emptiness that had settled over the once bustling lakeside. Maybe revenge wasn't as satisfying as he imagined. Maybe there was a better way to make his point without destroying the sense of community he secretly valued. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He replayed Sophia's words in his head, weighing his options. By morning, he had made up his mind. He would reopen the lake, but on his terms. It wouldn't be an easy decision, and he knew it would require compromise. But perhaps, just perhaps, it could pave the way for reconciliation. Little did Ethan realize that his next move would change everything. For himself, for his neighbors, and for the future of the lake they all cherished. The next morning, Ethan called a meeting, not through the HOA, but directly with his neighbors. He sent out flyers and posted notices on community boards, inviting everyone to gather by the lake at sunset. When the day arrived, a curious crowd began to assemble near the fence. Some came out of anger, others out of curiosity, and a few simply because they wanted answers. Ethan stood beside the locked gate, dressed casually in jeans and a flannel shirt. As the murmurs died down, he took a deep breath and addressed the group. I know things have been tense around here lately, he began, his voice steady but sincere. And I'll be honest, I didn't handle this situation perfectly. But neither did the HOA when they fined me for something that should have been a shared privilege. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. This lake means a lot to me, and it clearly means a lot to all of you too. So here's what I propose. I'll reopen the lake to the neighborhood, but under new rules. The crowd stirred, exchanging glances. Ethan held up a hand to quiet them. First, anyone who wants to use the lake will need to pay a small fee. This money will go toward maintaining the property, cleaning up trash, repairing the dock, and protecting the wildlife. Second, the HOA needs to publicly apologize for how they treated me and agree to amend their policies so no one else gets caught in the same mess. There were murmurs of surprise mixed with skepticism. Someone shouted, "Why should we trust you?" Another voice chimed in, "What happens if we don't agree?" Ethan met their gazes calmly. "If we can't come to an agreement, then nothing changes. The lake stays closed. But I think we can do better than that, for ourselves and for our kids." Martha stepped forward, her arms crossed tightly. "You're asking a lot, Ethan. Do you really expect us to roll over just because you own the land now?" "No," Ethan replied firmly. "I'm asking for fairness. You made me feel like an outsider. Now I'm giving you a chance to fix that, to show that this neighborhood is about more than rules and fines. It's about people working together." His words struck a nerve. Slowly, hesitant nods spread through the crowd. Parents glanced at each other, thinking of their children who missed playing by the water. Longtime residents remembered the joy the lake had brought to the community before the conflict began. Even Martha seemed to soften slightly, though she remained silent. Sophia spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "Let's give this a try. We've seen where division takes us. It's time to heal." After a long pause, Martha finally sighed. "Fine. If the majority agrees, the HOA will issue a public apology and review its policies. But this doesn't mean we approve of your methods, Ethan." Ethan nodded, accepting the olive branch. Over the next few days, details were ironed out. Months passed, and the neighborhood slowly began to heal. The lake, once a source of division, became a symbol of unity, or at least progress. Ethan's new rules were simple but effective. Anyone who wanted to use the lake paid a small fee, which went directly into maintaining its beauty and preserving its ecosystem. A schedule was set up for regular cleanup days, where families worked side by side to pick up trash, plant trees, and repair the dock. Even Martha, though reluctant at first, joined in during one of these events, rolling up her sleeves to pull weeds along the shoreline. Ethan took an active role in overseeing the changes. He organized fishing workshops for kids, teaching them how to cast a line and respect the water. On weekends, he could often be found sitting on the dock with his own rod, chatting with neighbors who stopped by to thank him, not just for reopening the lake, but for sparking a much-needed conversation about fairness and community spirit. Still, not everyone forgave him overnight. Some residents continued to hold grudges, muttering under their breath whenever they saw him. But Ethan didn't let it bother him. He knew that change rarely came without resistance, and he'd learned to accept that some wounds took longer to mend than others. What mattered most was that the majority of the neighborhood had come together, finding common ground where none seemed possible before. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan sat alone on the dock. It was quiet except for the gentle lapping of the water against the posts. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. This place, which had caused so much turmoil, had also brought clarity. He realized now that his fight hadn't been about revenge. It had been about standing up for himself, and in doing so, inspiring others to do the same. As if on cue, Sophia approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Ethan with a smile. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Not at all," Ethan replied, scooting over to make room.